Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. And the dead fountain pen on the slab ready for resurrection to the land of the writing again is this 1945 Parker Vacumatic Jr. in Azure Blue Pearl. Yes, we're back to the Vacumatics again. I love these pens so much that every time I see one on eBay that's in a desperate state, I just have to rescue it. There's something about the pearlescent stacked celluloid on these pens. It's so thick and resilient and polishes up so beautifully that I love the transition from old and dingy and not working to bright and shiny and working like a charm. So first we'll take a look at the pen, what it looks like before resurrection here, all the way around. We open it up and take a look at the nib, and then we'll look at what it looks like after resurrection down below for you people that can't wait. YouTube keeps telling me that everyone wants to see this resurrection within a few seconds of the beginning of the video. Otherwise, people switch away. I'm good with that. Now that those people with low attention spans are gone, we can spend the next 20 to 30 minutes resurrecting this gorgeous fountain pen, see how it writes, and see whether I'm successful at the resurrection. And maybe I'll sell this pen. We'll see. So let's triage this pen and see what it will take to get it back to the land of the writing again. Overall, it seems to be in pretty good shape, relatively dingy, but that celluloid will polish up and brighten up really nicely. This is a junior. It has the 2 cap bands and no blue diamond on the clip. There is a date imprint, and there is the imprint, 2 dots and a 5. So that's the second quarter of 1945. And this one was made in Canada. So it says made in Canada, Parker Vacumatic, patent number, and there's a number of the patent, and registered TMS, which is registered trademark system. I don't know, registered trademark something or other. And you're gonna have to forgive my resolution of my camera here. My camera has regressed to an iPhone 14 because my iPhone 17 Pro Max with the beautiful cameras is in the shop. It's on the way back to me. There was an issue with the battery. So this is the best resolution I can get right here, folks. Sorry about that. The clip looks to be in really good shape. It's dingy and tarnished, but will polish up nicely. The top finial is dull, but seems to be in good shape. The clip moves a little bit, but it's not loose. And lots of grime under that clip. So this pen has been in storage for a long, long time. The cap bands are intact, and there's no brassing on any of that gold. The end blind cap comes off. There's no chew marks on this at all, and there's no diaphragm in there. It's just springy. But the barrel is relatively transparent. You can see the end of the piston rod there and the diaphragm pellet retainer right at the end with some shards of old desiccated diaphragm in there. When you take the cap off, the nib is in really fine shape. It's all tarnished, lots of old ink. The nib itself looks like a fine Ebonite feed, and I dip tested this and it writes a very fine line, and the nib is fairly bouncy and flexible. So that'll be an interesting restore. It's going to need some tweaking and some tuning to write smoothly. And the section is in pretty good shape. No chips or cracks or gouge marks. The barrel and the cap have just typical wear, no big gouges, so this should polish up nicely. Those cap bands are tight and not sliding around. So the first thing we want to do is see whether we can get that section off of there. These should not be shellacked in place. If it's held in tight, it's probably old ink, but I'll try without any heat first. A little bit, no. I'm gonna give a little bit of heat to see if I can get that loose. Just a little bit of heat to start. See whether that's loosened it up a little bit. Yep, it loosened it up fine. Okay, a little bit more heat. And there we go. Yeah, so there's no shellac on there, which is good. It was just old crusty ink, and heating the celluloid barrel just expanded it a little bit and allowed it to move. The yellow celluloid breather tube, which looks really quite clean actually. Let's see if it'll come out. Yep, there we go. So now we need to see if we can get that feed and nib out of that section. I'm going to put all of these pieces in the ultrasonic bath with some pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia. We'll let that agitate in there for 2 to 3 minutes just to break up some of that old ink, and it might flush out some of the old desiccated diaphragm that's still inside that barrel. And then we'll come back. Okay, so we're out of the bath here, and that nib looks nice and shiny already without any polishing. So let's see if we can knock this out of the section. Find the right hole and use the rod with the right size to knock this out. Yeah, it's coming out easy. There's the nib remain behind. There it is. And unfortunately, this camera does not close up and focus at the same time. But there it is on the left, looking very shiny indeed. And let's see if I can use the telephoto a little bit better. There we go. This says 14K Parker, Canada, .50, dot, and a dot underneath, so 3 dots. So that's the 4th quarter of 1945. I don't know why they add the 0. That's not 1950. And it says registered trademark on the bottom. And there it is on the back. And here's our section. It's dull, but no deep gouges. We'll polish that up. And there's our feed. Looking dull, Ebonite. But other than that, it's clean, no scratches or gouges or breaks. So we'll see what these look like on the other side. And here are the nib, feed, and section all polished up. Let's take a look at this over here. My apologies for the blurriness. I'll have my iPhone 17 back next week. But that's all beautiful and shiny. But there's one thing about this nib. It looks like it's been slightly bent up at the tip here. That looks more like a Schaefer nib than a Parker. So I'm going to try to straighten that out a little bit. I'll use my nib pliers, which have very, very thin jaws on them for dealing with nibs. And we're just going to grip it gently and just give it a small tug down to straighten it up a little bit. And be very gentle on those tips because the tipping material is welded on, and that weld is from 1945. It's a little straighter, and it could be aligned a little bit better as well. There. That's pretty good for now because putting it in with the feed will adjust it as well. Speaking of the feed, there's the shiny Ebonite feed. Just the visible part is polished up, and there's our section looking beautiful shiny black. So now I'm going to put the nib, feed, and section back together again in the pen so I can dip test this nib and do whatever I need to do to make it right perfectly. And then we'll take the section and nib out and see about replacing that diaphragm. The barrel is out of the bath, and some fragments of that old desiccated diaphragm came loose. But let's put this back together again first. So I'm just going to add a little silicone oil to those threads just to help lubricate it. There we go. Now we're going to put the nib and feed together so they're placed right there where the swoop of the nib sort of intersects with the feed. Make sure it's straight. Grab it top and bottom. And then we're going to search for that sweet spot that has lived in since 1945. Feels like it's right there. I'm going to give it a push right there. And then realign the nib because they came slightly askew, and the feed seems to be pushing the nib out of alignment. This is a fairly flexible nib, so it's very sensitive to the position in there, and I can't quite get it to align. So I'm going to take it out again. And I think I may have pushed it in a little bit too far. So we're going to tap it out again. You see that nib sticks in there like it did when I first took it out, which is tending to bend the nib around. Now there seems to be one spot there. Yeah, I can feel it clicking around in there. I'm going to take the stem of this Ebonite feed and sand it down a bit with some 400 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to just open up. You probably can't see, maybe if I do that. So there's some rough edges in there. You can see all that, those chew marks. I'm going to try to smooth that out a bit with my Dremel. So I redid the reseating of the nib and feed without you, sorry about that, and it took a bit of adjusting to get that feed correct. I think the nib is now aligned correctly, the feed is aligned correctly, but that's a very flexible nib, so it's tending to do this. So we'll have to check it in the writing test and to see how well it writes and how scratchy it might be. So I've got some Watermans here, and let's do a dip test. I held the pen so low because every time I write normally, my knuckle is in the way of the camera. So I'm trying to write and not block the camera at the same time, which I can't do, so you're going to have to trust me. 1945 Parker Vacumatic Azure Blue Pearl. I'll check the wetness first. It's very, very wet, and it is a needle nose. That's no pressure. Let's see how bouncy it is, which I think is very bouncy. Yep, this is a very flexible nib. So it goes from what I consider an extra fine to probably a broad. Let's check these lines out and see. Get out my pad here, and this is 0.25 for the horizontal. And then the vertical is over here, and that's 0.3. Let's give it a push here. Yep, almost 0.9. Horizontal is a 0.25. The vertical is 0.3, and the push is 0.9 millimeters. So it goes from an extra fine to a broad very easily. But it's writing with no pressure, and it's got a lot of feedback. It's not scratchy, but it's feedback. I'm going to polish this with some 8,000 to 12,000 grit micro mesh. A little bit of water there, and we're going to first, before you do any of this micro mesh stuff, you have to double check to make sure the nib is aligned. Those tines have to be absolutely together before you do this, or you'll ruin the nib. So we're going to go up and down, side, side, side 8 times, all points of the compass, and reverse circles, forward circles 8 times, and then infinity symbols 8 times, and figure 8s 8 times. And then we're going to do the same thing with some 12,000 grit. Again, no pressure on this because it's a flexible nib. So that is a lot smoother. When a nib is that fine and flexes that much, you're going to catch that inside edge. It's not catching now, but I don't want to polish it any more than that, because then we'll get baby's bottom on it by polishing off those inside edges. So if this is the tip of our nib with the slit right there, when this splits aside, when it flexes, it does this, and that edge there and that edge there are sharp. If you polish them too much, they'll do this. Polish off those edges, and that's where you get baby's bottom. And if these are rounded too much, your downstrokes will be missing because the ink won't touch the page. So I'm going to leave this amount of feedback in here because this is a flexible vintage nib. Now let's see whether we can get that diaphragm out of this pen. Without the diaphragm working, this just becomes an eyedropper pen. Okay, so now we'll get out the vac extractor from the inky nib. We put that on the end of the vac pump, and we tighten it down as tight as we can go. And we add a little bit of heat to the bottom of that to see whether it will budge. Just a little bit of heat to start, and we'll see how it does. And I think it's budging. This is good news. Yep. There we are. Now, the desiccated sack is still holding the pellet retainer inside the barrel. So we don't pull on that because we'll snap off that celluloid rod. So I'm going to put those couple of threads back on again. Release the collet. Release the hounds.
Release the hounds.
And then we put this in our block that holds the pen and allows us to push that pellet retainer vac pump out. Let's give it a slight push. There we go. And there's the barrel free, and there's our pump with the remains of the old sack attached to the pellet retainer right there at the end. So let's take a look at this for a second here. This part right here is ramped up, and that's what presses the diaphragm into the end of the barrel. So there's no shellac needed to hold that latex diaphragm in there. The very inside of that latex diaphragm has a pellet in it, and it is retained by this Ebonite pellet retainer. And so we need to remove all of that old latex. You can see it's all falling apart already. So the rest of it's inside. And you can see that inside the barrel, all the remains of that old diaphragm is all stuck to the inside of that barrel. So I want to try to pull this out. Sometimes that pellet will come out with the remains of this diaphragm. Other times the diaphragm just breaks and leaves the pellet in there. So what we have to do now, two things we have to do. We have to remove the remains of that diaphragm off that aluminum collar. There we go. When it's pliable like that, it comes off easy. Sometimes it's old and desiccated and is crystallized, and you have to use an X-Acto blade to scrape it off. But that came off easy. You can see the pump is working very, very nicely. The spring is intact. Celluloid rod is good. We just have to drill that pellet out of there without destroying the Ebonite retainer. And I do that with my Dremel tool. So I have these tiny drill bits that I got on AliExpress. Very, very fine needle drill bits. The largest of them is the one that I need. And we put that inside my Dremel tool. And I place my Dremel on my bench horizontally and very carefully, using my magnifier specs, you drill that pellet out. And then once I've drilled a hole in the pellet, I can use a dental pick, to remove the remains of it. And there it is, still encased in latex. And the pellet retainer is perfect. And that aluminum collar is very, very clean, so it doesn't need any more cleaning. I'll clean up those threads, and then we'll attach a new diaphragm. Now comes the funkiest part of a Vacumatic repair, installing a new latex diaphragm on that pump. I have a pellet pusher from the Inky Nib, and the cool thing about this tool is it already has a mark here that indicates how long your diaphragm needs to be. It has the mark back here as well, and so all you need to do is put the pellet pusher into the new diaphragm and then mark the location of that groove and trim it off. You got the right length. If you have a pellet pusher like this one from the Pendragons, there's no marking on it, but you need to cut your diaphragm 31 millimeters from the tip to there. 31 millimeters is the marking that's on this Inky Nib pellet pusher. And then there's no guesswork. And latex likes to stick to itself, so we use pure talc here. And I'm just going to put some talc on the pellet pusher itself, so I get some on the inside. And you can see it rides up on this knurled bit, so I actually just trim off a little bit of the end there. Let's not make a mess here. And then I dredge the latex in talc. So it's got talc on it inside and out. This allows latex to slip against itself instead of sticking. So now you can see I've trimmed it to right to the end there, and I've got the pellet right up against the end of the pellet pusher, so it holds right inside there. And then I can feel where that groove is with my fingernail, and just put my X-Acto blade right there and make a cut. I can see where that cut is right there, and then I can just trim it at that point. And we see that it's perfect length. So we can take this and push that pellet into the pellet retainer, and we want to hear that satisfying click, not the unsatisfying crunch of the Ebonite retainer breaking. Click, that's good. More talc the better. And leave that pellet pusher pushed up against that pellet, and we're going to peel this back on itself. Getting it started is always the most difficult part among difficult parts. There. Once I've got a cuff going, you sort of worry it back onto itself. We get that cuff as far down as we can get it, and then I kind of double it up on itself to get this edge back to there. Once I've done that, then I can sort of uncouple it. There, now you can see I've got that latex edge that was back here out from underneath, and then I use the pump itself to push to unkink it. Try to hold on to this end and push it out. And I gotta pull it back again so that it's only right there. There we go. So I had it all the way over there, and I sort of unkinked it there. And now that's how the latex diaphragm works. Try to dig the remains of that diaphragm out. Maybe you can see, again, the limitations of my iPhone 14 here. Apologies, but we dig the remains of that diaphragm out of there. Lucky that this one's fairly pliable, so I'm able to tease it out fairly easily. But it gets stuck right there where it was pressed up against the barrel by the pump. I can't say I approve of the previous owner's choice of blue-green ink. Not very matchy for me, but I was able to get all of that latex out of there, and then I took my dental pick and just hooked it into one of those threads and just kept turning the barrel so that pick just sort of scrapes those threads clean, runs all the way up to the end. Now we can take our diaphragm and just put a bead of silicone oil around the end and twist it into the barrel just to make sure it doesn't kink up on itself. I can put some silicone oil on those threads as well and get those threads started, and then put the collet on the end, and we can run it back and forth, get that silicone oil moving, and then just tighten it down hand tight. You don't want to over crank that because it'll split the celluloid. And we're going to take the collet off and use our inspection camera to make sure that the pump is working correctly. Put the blind cap back on, reinstall the breather tube. Doesn't work without the breather tube. And put more silicone oil on those threads. Not only lubricates the threads, it prevents leakage. There we go. Now we need to test fill this pen to see how much ink it will absorb. So first, let's measure the pen without the cap. 10.24 grams. Press tare. Put the blind cap back on the scale, and then we get out some Watermans and we do a couple of pumps. If you want to see how a Parker Vacumatic works on the inside, I did a video using a transparent Parker 51 Vacumatic that can show you what's happening inside the barrel when you fill it with ink. You can see that video by clicking right up there. We're going to immerse the nib and section into the ink vertically, push the pump down and let it go, and wait a couple of beats, and then push it down and let it go and wait a couple of beats while the barrel fills with ink. Each successive pump spills more ink into the barrel, and when you don't hear bubbles anymore, it's probably full. It takes about 5 or 6 pumps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I'm not hearing any bubbles anymore. So 6, 7, 8. Who do we appreciate? Parker, rah, rah, rah. Let's put it on. I'm not satisfied with that. There we go. Gave it a couple more pumps and we got 1.45. That's pretty good. 1.5 milliliters of ink. And there we go. Now that I've got the pen working correctly, I'm going to dump that ink out of there, remove the section and nib, and polish up the barrel and the blind cap. And we need to remove that clip and then polish up the cap as well. In the immortal words of Rosanna Dana, it's always something.
Well, Jen, it just goes to show you. It's always something.
I put a pencil as a mandrel inside the cap and used some rubber gripper to remove the top jewel, which came out very nicely. I was actually very pleased. Then I was faced with this. This is very unusual for me anyway. I've never seen this. Maybe they only do this in Canada. But this brass nut usually has a slot across it, so you can use a slot screwdriver to unscrew it. And there's no slot on this. Maybe they use a reverse thread of those threads tool to tighten it. So what I did was I took a small Phillips head on my LTT screwdriver and just sort of pushed it in and got it moving. Anyway, once I got it moving, I didn't want to destroy those threads because that won't go back in again. So I sort of gripped it as it was moving with my pen tooling nib pliers and sort of teased it all the way around until it came out. So what I'm going to do now, so I can put this back in again, is I'm going to use my Dremel tool to grind a slot into there so I can use my slot screwdriver to screw it back down again. And there we go. I ground a slot into that brass nut. That will accept my slot screwdriver and allow me to screw it back in again. But now that we've got these parts out, I'm just going to put that together for safekeeping. I can polish up this clip. Let's put it right there before polishing. And we can polish this cap. Let's look at it up here. I'm going to polish it with my micro mesh. And I'll go from 1500 grit to 12,000 grit. If there are any scratches that won't come out with the 1500, I'll go at it with my 400 grit sandpaper. And then we'll finish up on my Dremel tool with some polishing compound. And we'll just take a look at the barrel while we're at it. I'm going to avoid that imprint right there so we don't wipe it out. and go through the micro mesh, and we'll see what it looks like below. I tell you folks, there's nothing quite as glorious as a 1940s split arrow Parker gold clip. They are just amazing. They're all gold filled, so very, very deep amount of gold, and it doesn't matter how many years go past, a little bit of polishing and it looks like brand new. Just spectacular. There is the cap all shined up and beautiful all the way around. I masked off those gold cap bands with low-tack painter's tape while I did the micro mesh from 1500 through to about 3600. Then I took the masking tape off, polished the whole cap with 4000 through 12,000, and then used 2 grades of polishing compound, Meguiar's Mirror Glaze 9, Professional Swirl Remover 2.0, followed by Cardinal Pens Micro Gloss number 1, which is the finest polishing compound I've found, and it does a terrific job. You can see the difference between the barrel and the cap at this point. So let's get at this barrel next. And here we are with the barrel all polished up and brand new, just looking fantastic. Gotta love how celluloid polishes up. You know, one thing I'm finding interesting about this particular Azure Blue is how pale the blue is. Yeah, I should put it on a gray background so you can see a little bit better. But it's looking silver rather than blue, except for where it was blocked by the cap, because it's definitely blue right there. But then it gets silver back here, so I can only imagine that that has to do with the fact that the sun has gotten to the rest of this pen. Sunlight has dulled the blue, except for where it was protected by the cap. So signs of age right there. So the next thing we need to do is put the clip back on the cap, and then I'll polish the top jewel once the clip is back on again. So I've ground a slot into that little nut right there, and we'll put my pencil in the cap as a mandrel. And with these juniors, with the 2 cap bands, there's no particular way to line it up with the clip. The seniors have the chevron cap band, the wide cap band, that has a small blank area for engraving. But I'm just going to choose the darkest side, and the darkest side is right there. Luke, you must come to the dark side with your clip.
Never. I'll never turn to the dark side.
So we'll put it right there on the dark spot, sort of between the 2 breather holes, and see whether we can get this started. Had to do the rest off camera because it was not enough space for me to stand it up straight and press straight down. But that's really tight right there. Tighten a little bit more, and it's right between the 2 breather holes there. So now let's take the plastic jewel, and that screws into the nut, and then we use some rubber mat or rubber band works as well to tighten that jewel down. There we go. Now we can put the section back in. Going to renew that silicone oil. This is a great way to clean this pen. Whoever owns this pen next, you should know that this is not shellacked down. It's just tightened down with some silicone oil. And when you want to clean out your pen, just empty it out of any ink and unscrew that section. Use a syringe or a bulb syringe to clean out the inside of the barrel. Put the section back on with a little bit of silicone grease or oil to seal that section. And there we have one resurrected and beautiful 1945 Parker Vacumatic. Let's call it Azure Blue Silver Pearl. Why not? Just going to polish up that top finial now, and we'll come right back and show that. And there's the top finial all shined up. I'm going to fill this pen with some ink and then come back with my thoughts about this resurrection. So what are my thoughts about this pen resurrection? Well, Azure Blue Pearl Parker Vacumatics are a weakness of mine. In fact, the only Parker Vacumatic I actually keep is my beloved 1945 Parker Azure Blue Senior with a custom-made stub nib. You can see the difference between the junior and the senior. In fact, this junior here is a little bit longer. This one's made in Canada, but the senior has the blue diamond lifetime warranty and the larger chevron cap band, whereas the junior doesn't have that diamond and has 2 thin cap bands. You can also see the difference between the blues. So this one being a little bit more silver, but they're both 1945 and they're both beautiful fountain pens. I'm never relinquishing this one, but this one may belong to someone else real soon. This pen gave me no problems. It fills with 1.45 milliliters of ink. It has a fully restored diaphragm inside, and it has a beautiful, flexible, extra fine 14 karat gold nib. So this is a very special fountain pen, and I'm going to relinquish it for only $240 US plus shipping. If you're interested in purchasing this pen, just drop me an email at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address so I can get you a shipping quote and instructions on how to pay my PayPal. I hope you've enjoyed this resurrection as much as I have. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section. You'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them, which means that you'll get a leg up on everyone else on purchasing these beautiful resurrected fountain pens. Basic members get 10% off their purchase, and patron level members at $5 a month will get 20% off these fountain pens. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you. For watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.